Greetings and welcome to the Data Armory. This is another part of a tutorial series on essential statistical concepts for data analysis. And as we had seen in our introductory part, we saw that when we're talking about exploratory data analysis, that one of the things that you're supposed to know about is structured data, of which we did in our previous part. Having understood about structured data, another essential thing that you should know under structured data is rectangular data. We looked at data types in our previous tutorial, and today we look at rectangular data. It's a short tutorial but very important, and we shall see why it is important to understand rectangular data, which has been organized in form of rows and column, which in Pandas library is called a data frame. And remember, in as much as we are using Pandas library to understand these essential statistical concepts, is that the concepts will apply, will mostly apply even if you are not using Pandas library. So it's important to understand the concepts, and you will apply them in the tool that you are using. So when we talk about rectangular data, we have said that in Pandas library, this rectangular data is known as a data frame object. And because we're talking about Pandas library, let us look at what is a data frame in Pandas, because having one of the things you should understand is rectangular data. This is data that has been organized in form of rows and columns. And in the Pandas library, this is called a data frame. So what is a data frame? So the best place to get the definition of a data frame is from the Pandas library documentation, which says that a data frame is a two-dimensional, size-mutable, potentially heterogeneous tabular data. So in short, is that a data frame is tabular data. So one of the things that you should understand when it comes to essential statistical concepts is tabular data. And in Pandas library, this tabular data is a data frame. So it continues and says, when we talk about data frame in Pandas library, is that data structure also contains labeled axes, which are rows and columns. Arithmetic operations align on both row and column labels can be thought of as a dictionary-like container for series objects, the primary Pandas data structure. Now you see the importance of understanding rectangular data or understanding data frames, more especially if you are working with the Pandas library, that this is the primary Pandas data structure. And it will be very wrong by all intents and purposes to be working with the Pandas library and not having an understanding of its primary data structure. And already that sets space as to why understanding rectangular data or data frames is important, and more especially when you're working with Pandas library. But remember, as we have said, that this is not only important for those who are working with Pandas library, but those who are also working with other libraries or those who are in the data analysis field. It is important to understand this. So that is how Pandas documentation defines data frame. But again, to define it further, is that a data frame is a structured representation of tabular data. We have already seen that. And when you talk about structured representation, remember our past tutorial whereby we talked about structured and unstructured data. So a data frame is a structured representation of tabular data which takes the form of a rectangular table, And that is why when we were talking about data frames, we saw in our introductory part that data frames, which is a rectangular data which has been organized in form of rows and columns. So as we'll be looking at data frames in statistics for data analysis, we had looked at unstructured and structured data, that when you are doing statistics or in statistics for data analysis, you will meet unstructured and structured data, and we handled this in a previous tutorial. And under structured data, as we established in our previous tutorial, under structured data, there is rectangular data. So under structured data, there is rectangular data, and this node is what we want to expand in this new mind map, whereby under structured data, we are looking at data frames. We are looking at data frames. And as we have said, that when you are working with structured data, as we saw in a previous tutorial, you will be working with data frames, which is the primary data structure in the pandas library. And this data that has been organized in form of rows and columns, So that explains what we have just read here. A data frame is a structured representation of tabular data taking the form of a rectangular table. It comprises an organized assortment of columns, each table capable of holding various value types or various data types such as numeric, string, boolean, and others, and it resembles the layout of a spreadsheet. For example, you have worked with Excel spreadsheet, and we have an example of that in this image. This is how a spreadsheet looks like. And as you know, that a spreadsheet is always organized in form of rows and columns, So the same is that a data frame in statistics for data analysis is a data structure that has been organized in form of rows and columns. For example, this is how a spreadsheet looks. If you have worked with Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets, basically this is how it looks. They are columns and they are rows, which are these rows, these cells. The cells will make rows and columns. So, or rather, they are columns and rows which are made of cells. So that is how a data frame will look like. It is not far from that. So another thing that it will look like is a database table. So it will resemble a spreadsheet, as we have seen in the image below, or a database table. And I think have a database table here. There's a database that I have here. We can look at it. Database table. You see how a database table looks like. So this scholarships DB is a database that I have in my local PC. But let me open a table. Let me see the tables that we have in this database. So there is this table called students. So we'll open this table so that we can see how a database table looks like. So the table is students. So let us open this table. So we'll select, there is a column on dates, there's a column on degrees, and there's a column on location in this database. So we'll select from students so that we can see how a database table looks like. And basically that's it. This is how a database table looks like. Let me expand this. So when you say that a data frame looks like a database table, this is how a database table looks like. This is how a database table looks like. And you see it has been organized in the form of columns. There's a column for date, there's a column for degrees, and there's a column for location. And there are rows. There are several rows. So basically, when you say that a data frame looks like a spreadsheet, we have seen this image. And when you say that a data frame, when you say that a data frames look like a database table, then I've shown you how a database table looks like. So what is the importance of understanding data frames when it comes to essential statistical concepts for data analysis? Is that first, comprehending data frames or rectangular data is of utmost importance for data analysts, as it lays the foundation for handling structured data in diverse analytical tasks. So even if you are not working with pandas, is that comprehending data frames or rectangular data is of utmost importance to you as a data analyst, for it will lay the foundation for handling structured data in your diverse analytical tasks. And in pandas specifically is important because it is a primary data structure in pandas library. So it will be very wrong, as you have said, that you are working with pandas library, but you don't have an understanding of its primary data structure. So DataFrame constitutes a fundamental data structure prevalent in numerous programming languages and libraries, with Python's pandas and R being notable examples. So even if you are working with R, it's important to understand what a data frame is, because it constitutes a fundamental data structure which is prevalent in numerous programming languages and library. And the library that we are using here is pandas. Another importance for understanding data frames in essential statistical concepts for data analysis is that another reason why you should understand data frames in essential statistical concepts for data analysis is that these data frames are commonly used to store and manipulate data in a tabular format, and we have explained that, akin to a spreadsheet or a data or a database. Now, a table, when talk about a spreadsheet or a database table, it's important to define what a database table is. We have seen the practical example, but a table is a grid of rows and columns that store data. So basically that is it. So in a nutshell, we can say that a data frame is a grid of rows and columns that store data, where each row holds a collection of columns and each column contains data of a specified type or a specified data type. So each row holds a collection of columns. So if we have this is a data frame, so we have said that each row holds a collection of columns. So row 1 will hold a collection of columns, like row 1 has column 1, column 2, column 3, blah blah blah. Row 2 will have column 1, column 2, column 3, like that. So that is what we mean that a row, when we say that a row holds, when you say that a row holds a collection of columns, you'll get that each row holds a collection of columns, like row 1 will hold column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, as you continue, as many columns as possible, as many columns as possible. And we see that understanding tables is fundamental to understanding the data in your database. So if you understand tables, if you understand the table, it is akin to understanding the data in your database, because if you understand a table, for instance, you know that this table has rows, and these rows is a collection of columns, and these columns are made up of various data types. Already you see that is making you understand the data in your database. So we have this image is an example, is a representation of a data frame. So representation of data in tabular form with rows and column, and these are good representation of what a data frame is. So we have already established that a data frame, as seen in image 2 below, comprises one row for each record and one column for each variable. So it's important to understand that a data frame, as seen in the image below, comprises one row for each record and one column for each variable. That takes us back to our mind map. That when talk about data frames, another thing that you should understand, a data frame comprises one row for each record and one column for each variable. So we can see that a row in a data frame holds cases, which are also called examples, which are called instances, which are also called observations, which are also called patterns, and which are also called what? Samples. So in a data frame which has rows, these rows hold cases, or which can also be called examples, or which can also be called instances, which can also be called observations, which can also be called patterns, which can also be called samples. So you will find that in your data analysis task, you will find that someone will tell you that this data frame has got 10,000 cases, to mean that it has got 10,000 rows, because a row holds cases, or this data frame has got 10,000 examples or instances or observations or patterns or samples. So when you hear that, in a nutshell, that's just another name for a row. That is just another name for a row. And we have seen that while a row will which is made up of various columns will hold up cases, or will hold up examples, or will hold up sample. A column will hold features, attributes, inputs, predictors, or variables. So in your data analysis path, when you're talking about data frames, it is important to understand that columns hold features, attributes, inputs, predictors, or variables. In short, a feature, features, attributes, inputs, predictors, or variables are just another name for columns in data frames. And let us look at an example to see the importance of understanding this. We look at an example of this data set in Kaggle. So this Spotify song attributes. Now I want you to see the description of the data set so that you understand why it's important to understand data frames. Now it says the Spotify song attributes. Now what are attributes? We have seen that a column holds attributes. The Spotify song attributes dataset is a comprehensive collection of music tracks encompassing various genres and artist name. Now this dataset provides valuable insights into the world of music, allowing enthusiasts, researchers, and data scientists to delve into the characteristics and nuance of each track. Now, the data set includes the author's streaming history throughout the year. It consists key features. So we have seen song Spotify attributes. It consists of key features. And now you see, if you understand that a column contains features or attributes. Now, if you have this understanding, so if you are working on this dataset, for example, already you will understand the description of this dataset. But assume a place whereby you don't know a data frame and what makes a data frame, now you will not understand the description of this dataset. And that's why we have said that understanding data frames is important in understanding the type of data that you are working with, in understanding the type of data that you are working with. And that's why we said that now you see the importance of what we say, that understanding tables is fundamental to understanding the data in your database. So we go back to this, that a dataset includes the author's streaming history throughout the year. It consists of key features such as danceability, energy, loudness, speechiness, acousticness, instrumentalness, liveliness, valence, tempo, duration, and time signatures. Now, these attributes provide a holistic view of the songs, enabling users to analyze and interpret different aspects of their musical composition. Now, already you see the importance of understanding a data frame which is made of rows and columns, and knowing that rows are made up of cases, examples, instances, observations, patterns, or samples, or these names are another name for rows, and also understanding that columns has features, attributes, inputs, predictors, and variable, or rather these names are other names for columns in a data frame. So we'll look at an example. Let us look at an example of let us now see a data frame. So a good example of where these names have been used is in the About section of the Spotify song attributes. So a good example of where these names have been used is in the About section of the Spotify song attributes, and we have seen that. So when you talk about data frames, the processing and manipulation of unstructured data are essential to transform it into a structured format. And we talked about unstructured and structured data in our previous tutorial. And we understand now that the processing and manipulation of unstructured data are essential to transform it into structured format, represented as a set of features within rectangular data. When we talk about features as a set of columns within rectangular data. For instance, a common method used for this purpose of manipulating unstructured data into structured data is web scraping, and in future we'll be looking at web scraping. So to see a data frame in the pandas library, we'll download the Spotify attributes dataset. We'll not go into how to download that. We already have a full tutorial on this, so we'll just run these cells so that we can see how this data frame looks like. So that we can see how this data frame looks like. To understand what is happening in these cells, you can check our tutorial on how to download datasets from Kaggle. So this now a data frame. This is the data frame. So when we talk about a data frame, this is how a data frame looks like in pandas library. And you can see it is organized in form of rows and columns. For example, here there is a column called track name. Let me just zoom out this so that you can see it properly. Just reduce the zoom level so that you can see it properly. This is how a data frame looks like in a pandas library. So it is organized in form of columns, track name, artist name, MS played, genre, danceability, energy, key, loudness, and there are these rows. So already you see, if you understand what a data frame is, when you are met with this, you will be able to understand what you are working with. And remember, this has been truncated because there are very many rows. There are 10,080 rows, and definitely when you read it, you'll not see all the rows. But when we'll be studying how to read data frames in pandas, you will see how we can write lines of code that will show the whole data frame. But here it will only show you the truncated format, which gives the first 5 rows and the last 5 rows, but you can display all the rows. So this is a data frame in a pandas library. This is how it looks like. That is how it looks like. That is how it looks like. So, and to get a concise summary of the data frame, this will help show you the number of rows and columns. For example, this one has got 10,080 entries, which can also mean that it has got 10,080 rows and 80 rows, and it has got a total of 22 columns. And remember, as we had said, when talk about it has got 10,000 entries, that is the same as saying that it has got 10,000 cases, 10,000 examples, 10,000 instances, 10,000 observations, 10,000 patterns, or 10,000 samples. And when we say that it has got 22 columns, that is saying as it has got 22 features or attributes or inputs or predictors or variables. So column will hold features, attributes, inputs, predictors, variables, and rows will hold cases, examples, instances, observations, patterns, samples. So different people will use different names, or different books will use different names for these rows and columns, or different projects will use different names. That's why it's under different names. That's why it's important to understand what a data frame is. What a data frame is. So basically, that is what we have studied on data frames. That is what you have studied on data frames, and you have seen the importance of understanding data frames when it comes to essential statistical concepts for data analysis.